All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Davis. I serve on the AOCPMR Student Education Committee. So really excited to have you all tonight. So thankful for our panelists, Josselyne, Ryan, Austin, and Gerardo. Jen is one of our other panelists. She unfortunately just emailed me that she did have a family emergency, so she's not able to make it tonight. But she sends her deepest apologies, and of course, she wishes she could be here. So. I'm excited for the next hour. Just the preliminary plan is to do some pre-prepared questions, and then we're going to do some pre-submitted questions that people that filled out the form asked, and then we're going to go through some audience questions, hopefully at least 10 minutes for the end for that as well. But so thankful you guys all made it here. We actually had a really good split of between OMS ones and fours, and even a couple of residents sign up, which is pretty cool. And for those that are not able to watch tonight, tell your friends that it will be on YouTube, so you can go back later and watch it as well. Okay, so first we're just going to do brief introductions for the panelists. So just panelists to say maybe which school you attended, where you're going to do your intern year, and then your PM&R residency as well.
Hi guys, my name is Austin Miller. I went to the Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine. I will be doing my intern year at the Lewis Gale Medical Center in Salem, Virginia, and I'll be doing my PM&R residency at Sinai of Baltimore.
Going on, guys? My name is Gerardo Rivera. I went to Rome Virtua, so I'm in New Jersey, and I'll be doing my internship at Morristown Medical Center, and then my PNR at Rutgers Kessler.
Hi everyone, I'm Josselyne. I went to Sam Houston State College of Osteopathic Medicine in Conroe, Texas, and I'm doing intern and rest of my 3 years at UT Southwestern.
And then I guess I'm last. My name's Ryan. I went to Burrell College of Osteopathic Medicine in Las Cruces, New Mexico. And then I'm doing a combined program between Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, Northwestern, and Lurie Children's Hospital, which are right across the street from each other in Chicago. So I'll be back and forth between both of those for the next 5 years.
All right, perfect. Thanks, guys. So we'll jump in here with the first question. So one of the first question is, what are some important ways to stand out on your audition rotations, and what are some things to definitely not do, and then how many audition rotations would you advise?
Um, so Davis, let me know if I miss any of those questions answering because there's a lot there. But going first, I'll just say that on some of my interviews, I had interviewers tell me that they realized that we never get to see our recommendation letters. So one of them took the time to read one of my recommendation letters to me. And one of the things in that recommendation letter was from an audition who said that I impressed them more than anyone else because I took the time to learn the names of the therapists that were seeing my patients. So every day I'd see the same therapist going in, giving a bath, usually the occupational therapist or the physical therapist. You'd be following up with them. And at some point, I just learned their names and started saying, "Hey, how you doing, Jesse?" And he really thought that was impressive that I took the time to actually get to know the names of the other team members, not just the patient and you're attending. Like there's other people there. Make sure you interact with the therapists and all the nursing staff and just be as friendly as possible. I also recommend when you have time going to patients' therapy sessions and cheering them on, kind of like a cheerleader. What was one of the other questions as part of this, Davis?
Yeah, no, that was a lot. That was great. Things to maybe not consider doing, and then just how many auditions rotations would you advise?
So I don't really know too many things of what not to do. I feel like you learn that pretty well in your third year of what's bad and what's not. Obviously, be on time. I think that's a big reason why people don't like get dinged off on things if you're late. Um, and then I think it's not a cookie cutter answer for how many to do. I think if you have places that you really love, definitely like hit those. Um, but for me, auditions, doing them before I submit to ERAS, you get a letter of recommendation, which can be an umbrella for all the other programs you apply to. And then after you submit your ERAS, the auditions are only beneficial for that one program. So I think it's good to get them early because then they have a lot more benefit. But afterwards, they still have a lot of benefit as they're specific to the program you really love. So I think try and go for the programs you in the geographic regions you want to be in, but get them before ERAS if you can. Afterwards, they're just only going to help you for that one individual program. So it really just depends what you want, where you want to be with regards to that.
Yeah, I'll touch on the away rotation part a little bit more about how many, because I think personally, I was someone I did 4 rotations and then I did 2 weeks at Sloan Kettering just doing cancer rehab. They don't have their own residency program though. But for me, I was like, hey, similar to Austin, doing my more important ones are the ones that I wanted to do earlier on. But after that, once I submitted ERAS, for me it was more like finding my fit and what is going to be a good program for me and all. So really, once that's submitted, it's kind of like a mute point. Everything else is really just seeing and reminding ourselves, hey, like throughout this whole process, we're interviewing these programs and kind of assessing them as much as they are assessing us. So for me, as many as you could do within a reasonable allotment of time and financial expenditure, I think is really up to you.
Okay. Another thing for like how to stand out, I think Austin kind of touched on it. Like they're wanting to see how you are, how you fit in that residency program. So like really getting to know the residents as well. So if they do ask you like, oh, we're gonna do this thing afterward, like, oh, we're gonna play pickleball, oh, we're gonna go do this, like if you feel like you are able to, like you have enough energy, I think that is something that could also like be better, like to benefit you. And then because I know there's a lot of pressure in securing those letters of rec. So what I did for my very first rotation, because that was like my very first one in August, I think they wanted it this way, but like at your 2 weeks, like talk to your attending, see where you're at. And then if you do inpatient for 2 weeks and then switch over to outpatient for 2 weeks, like see where you're at for your the first week of inpatient. And then second week, if they're able to write you that letter of rec, then that would be like the time to ask them. I think that is important. And then I think as far as like what to not do, I think we all kind of know like you want to be on your A game. You don't want to act like you're disinterested. So just make sure like you do go to the therapy sessions. If there's like a social, you want to attend the social. And then for me, number of audition rotations, I also don't think there's like an exact number. But I think if you at least want to make sure you get like a letter of rec, like 1 to 2. I didn't have an at-home institution, so I knew I needed to secure at least like 2 rotations. So that's my 2 cents.
All right. And then I think I'll just round it out by saying this really is the time to see if a program is a good fit for you as much as they're trying to see if you're a good fit for them. So be yourself on your rotations. You obviously want to stand out in your knowledge. So doing like a PM&R Pocketpedia and knowing like the modified Ashworth scale or a GMFCS if you're working with kids or different things about bowel programming is great. But ultimately, your preceptors are going to know that you don't have a ton of PM&R experience. There's only a few schools in the country where it's a required rotation prior to your 4th year. And so what you really want to get good at then is mastering the things they do teach you. If you're working with an SCI attending and they're teaching you, spasticity or a full Asia exam and they're giving you little tips and tricks, coordinate those and bring them into your exam later in the rotation. Don't leave out those opportunities that can show that you're a good learner and that you're malleable. And I'd also say make sure you're giving people, often you'll be on a rotation with a lot of other students. Make sure you're giving other people time to shine too. There's nothing that says more than, being a good team player. And then some things maybe like not to do would just be like, don't talk about other programs. Don't talk about like, if this isn't your #1 program, don't tell anyone else that on the rotation. Just keep those things close to your chest and, be authentic, but don't badmouth other things that you've seen along the way because you'll start to compare things as you do multiple rotations. And then like Gerardo, I actually did 5 away rotations, which I was exhausted at the end. But I don't think I would have done it any other way. It gave me the opportunity to see a really diverse group of programs, and you don't start to understand the nuances that could affect your personal life until you can compare and contrast multiple places. The first program I went to, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then the second program I went to, I was like, wait, there's these other things that I didn't know about, these intangibles that I could have that I want to be part of my training. So I would say do as many as possible and just sort of keep an eye out for opportunities along the way. Don't be discouraged if you don't have things lined up right now. I got emails in October and November about rotations in December and January being open. So don't be discouraged if you don't have a lot right now.
Great, thanks, guys. Second question, kind of taking a step back as just thinking about like preparing for ERAS. Can you share any advice regarding putting together your personal statement?
Yeah, and first off, nobody else had any other comments from the other panelists before I go to the next one? Okay, awesome. So with my personal statement, I took some of the elements from my medical school personal statement and then I just built on it. So I had spent a lot of time on that one. So I think some of the elements of showing, not telling, kind of, I think, paint them a picture, but get to the point. You don't need to tell a dramatic story. I sent my personal statement to the department chair for one of the PM&R programs that I liked, and he looked at it and he kept telling me to stop making it so dramatic, just get right to the point. They read a lot of these, and that was just N of 1. So that's just what I did with it. Really get into like why that program, which is why I think like getting a PM&R rotation at some point, like before you submit ERAS, gives you a good perspective. Going to patients' therapy sessions gives you a lot of perspective to write that personal statement. So having that experience of seeing a patient going through therapy was really valuable in helping me to modify the personal statement I had for medical school. And I just took some of the same kind of themes. I didn't take like the whole thing and rewrite it or take it and just modify it. I just took the themes out of it. But I think it's a great way to start. And also, if I've helped some other people with their personal statements, if you're kind of lost, you can, this sounds weird, but you can just have like a brainstorming session with ChatGPT and just be like, hey, I'm writing my personal statement. And it's just brainstorming. It's not writing it for you, but you're just having a conversation back and forth until something's like, wow, that's a great idea. I like that. So just in case you're lost, that's one way of doing it. So that's kind of how I went about it.
Yeah, I think similar to many of us, we don't have home PM&R rotations. So you kind of know what PM&R is, but you don't really know until you're kind of in the rehab center, you're seeing these patients. So I don't think there's a big rush to say, oh, I need to have my personal statement done by June 1st. But I'm a big advocate. Really, if you're out anywhere and you have an idea, write it down. I had a little notes tab on my phone just saying like, oh, that could be a good idea. That could be. So I really think it's like that SpongeBob meme that you're just writing and then you're just like staring at your laptop and you're like, I know I need to write this. And then you're studying for step 1 or step 2 and all that stuff. And like, but I know I need to do it, but you just can't get to it. So really just having some ideas. And then really once you're in the rehab, I think that's when I was kind of like enlightened. I was like, oh, like this is exactly where I want to go. So kind of giving yourself time, understanding you have time to do it, but really giving yourself that focus.
Yeah. I would like touch on one thing, like length. I did ask like when attending, like what is something that you're looking for? And she said keep it to 1 page. I tried as much as I could. There was like a tiny paragraph like hanging off. And then kind of what Austin mentioned, like for the programs that you did go do a rotation at, like that last paragraph could be a little blurb on like why that specific program is like one that you want to go to. And then as far as like the actual like the content of my personal statement, I wanted to have a theme throughout it. So for me, like my entire journey through medicine, there was a lot of running involved. And then I tried to attach that with like my like patient stories and experiences. So that's what my content looked like. And that was something that I think kind of like kept their focus. So if there's something outside of medicine that you could also incorporate, have a little fun with it, because they read so many of these like all the time. So that could be something for you to stand out to.
I would say writing a successful personal statement should look a lot like you having a conversation with another person. I asked some of my closest friends who were not in medicine to read my personal statement and make sure that it sounded like me. They didn't know anything about the specialty I was pursuing or like these experiences that I had, but I wanted to make sure that when I went into the interviewer already kind of knew what I was going to sound like, what kind of like phrases I was going to use. I mean, it was more of a conversation piece that could be read that way rather than like sort of a formalized, intro paragraph, three bodies, and a conclusion. Although you want it to be succinct and well organized, you don't need a big experience to like come up in the first paragraph and be touched on in every single paragraph. I think I had more of a central theme that was just like an idea of how each of the paragraphs could tie together, and I closed it out with that at the end. But you didn't get to the last sentence of each paragraph and say, "Oh yeah, I need to include my theme." You know, I think mostly in writing personal statements, it's going to take you a lot of drafts. So get used to it and start early. I think I started my first one in like April, and I probably rewrote it 100 times. And then the last thing that I did, which was really extra, but it justified me applying to as many programs as I applied to, is I did write a personal note in every single one of my personal statements. So I submitted 52 personal statements that were unique. Now you don't have to do that at all, but it held me accountable in researching the program and making sure I know why I wanted to go there and like justifying it to myself. But of course that takes like extra legwork, and at the end you might be like double, triple, quadruple checking, which takes time. So do it as you may.
All right. Question number 3. How did you prepare for interviews? What were some challenging questions that you were asked?
Anyone else have any other comments too, just before I get into this one from the panel? You good? Okay. So I kind of practice for interviews, like AOCPMR has a mock interview platform, so obviously definitely sign up for that. But I put all of my transition years at the beginning, so I could test things out, kind of get the nerves away. They usually come in first, and I just scheduled them before the PM&R interviews. So by the time I went to PM&R, I already had a good enough number of practice interviews, although like take them seriously with the TY, but they always ask you like about PM&R in the TY interviews. They want to know what you're applying into. And so I use that to kind of prepare me for the PM&R interviews. But one of the biggest things that I feel like a theme on most of my interviews was they asked situational questions, but they were usually based on like not like what would you do for this patient in therapy, but like how would you be a team player for like the other residents or the other therapists, or put you in a situation where like somebody else is stressing out at the end of the day? Like, do you stick around and help them? Do you leave? Like, how do you do that? I've also gotten like teach me something. So I used that to be interactive, and I like actually showed them like how to like play pickleball, hold a pickleball racket. I happen to have one behind me, so like visual aids are good for that. But focus like things that I like for those situational questions on team based scenarios, because I got a lot of those.
Yeah, I think in the ideal world, we all have the transitional years set up first, and then we can kind of do that. My first interview was my number 2 ranked program that I ended up putting on my rank list. Something's got to be first. I think that's something to like ease your mind, even with away rotations. You might show up to your first away rotation, and it's at that point your number 1 program. Something's got to be first. So really, at the end of the day, it's okay. I think at first it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna be horrible at this. They know that you're interviewing early. It's part of the process. I really wish I got that Teach Me Something, because I always had a golf club behind me and I never used it. So if someone saw me, they were like, why do you have a random golf club right behind you? Never got that question. And I really think my biggest question was, clearly my personal statement was about beer brewing, and they were like, "Tell me your favorite beer," and I was like, can I answer this? Like, is this okay?" But it really was like that's who I am, and I didn't want to. I wanted to find a program that like embraced that the same way that they want to embrace me. Like that was important to me. So if someone didn't bring that up, not that it was a red flag or something to me, but it was like, did they really read my personal statement? Was it someone else? So that was kind of like an indicator for me. And you can kind of use that as you will.
Yeah, so similar to what they've said, like I also did interview prep. I had someone ask me questions. And then I don't know if y'all did this during your interviews, but because they were all on Zoom, like I literally had like a question and then my answer like filled in. So if there was anything that I needed to go back to, like I really had it like on my screen. So there's your cheat sheet if you need one of those. And then I guess like tough questions, like they always ask me like strength and weakness. Was there a time where you ever disagreed with your attending? Um, what other ones? A professional mistake. I think that one was one that kind of cut me off guard. Um, and then like at the end, they'll always ask you like, do you have any questions for us? And that is your time to shine. Like that's where you did your research on that program. That's where you do go and you ask them those questions where if there's something that really caught your eye, so maybe cancer rehab, like ask about that. And then if they're attending that you can get connected to. So those are like things that I would think about too.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wrote down was questions at the end. I had some programs where I had a 30-minute interview slot and we got through with 15 minutes and they said, "What questions do you have for us?" Like, be ready with a whole list of questions. Don't leave it, don't, have one or two that you've set aside. Like, you got to have some pretty intellectual questions to ask that show that you're really interested in their program. I'd also say don't completely assume they've read your personal statement and your entire application. If you put something in your application as one of your like notable experiences and it applies to the question that they brought up, like speak on that. They do want you to expand on the limited 300 words that you were able to put down for like those meaningful experiences. You don't have to come up with something totally novel. But and with like the assumption that they had already read it in your application. It's totally okay to use those experiences. You may have problems on interview day. Do not worry about it. Like everyone is so understanding. I think Thalamus, which is one of the interview platforms, is like the bane of my existence. As you can tell, my lighting changed because my ring light has finally died. And so like things happen. You can adjust. It's totally fine. And I had one interview that like cut out on their end, and they ended up giving me a phone call. So don't worry about it. And then yeah, I think writing down little like post-it notes and sticking them on my computer was an easy way for me to just like feel comfortable in the moment. I knew my experiences, but sometimes it's nice to know that like they're sitting in front of you and you can always glance down at like a 3-word reminder of what you want to talk about. But eventually you'll get into a routine of answering these questions. It's all pretty much similar across the board.
I have two more things. If you can ring light, I think that's a huge thing. If you like a webcam, some of our laptops, personally, my laptop had a horrible camera, and I just wanted them to like properly see me. So getting a webcam, and then second, like everyone said, the really intelligent questions at the end of the interview. One of my favorite questions was, "What's your favorite place to eat around the area?" If you're doing on-call nights, you need a place to eat. And there was certain places that said, "Oh, it's a taco place," and I looked up the reviews and it had 2 stars, and I was like, "It's not my vibe." So really, just finding stuff that's important to you. If it's like a really cool brewery, like, do you guys have breweries around the area? Like, that's your moment to, again, like Josselyne said, set yourself apart. Maybe it's the intelligent question, but also having those fun questions to kind of make it light and fun and enjoy it.
Any other final comments there?
I'll just say one little thing. they mentioned how like the questions and stuff like that. I did have an interview. It was like you'd see multiple interviewers, and he started off with looking at my application for him, said, "This looks really good. I have no questions for you. What do you have questions for me?" And I have like 15 or 12 minutes, the entire interview with them, and it's just him saying, "All right, what questions do you have for me?" He didn't ask me a single question, so it can happen.
I would like add on to one of like to that specifically. Like it was kind of the opposite. They were asking me questions, but the way that their video was, it seemed like they were looking down the whole time. And so they made no eye contact with me. And I felt like, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? Like it became more of like, what am I doing wrong? But like try to just still be yourself. They're still listening to you, but obviously it's hard because eye contact, and this is like the most important like part of the process. Like you're finally getting to talk to those programs, but just as much as you can, just try to stay relaxed. They just want to get to know you and just like go with it. They just want to see if you're a good fit for them.
And Sarah asked a good question in the chat about whether or not we took notes. Personally, I didn't because I thought it would be distracting to myself. And there's not a lot of time to take notes. You can jot down things like here or there on like the 5 minutes in between when you switch for interviewers, which I did. But I think the most important part at the end for me was like doing a little 10 to 15 minute reflection of how I felt during the interview. I ran a spreadsheet through all of my interviews and then sort of like answered questions for myself about things that before I even like started the whole process, made note of and thought were important things to like recognize during my interview day. So that was I don't think taking notes is a great look. It's kind of distracting. I didn't even like when my interviewers were taking notes, but I understand they kind of have to. And then there's a question about handling away rotation interviews. Do your interviews. Like these programs totally understand that we have to go do interviews. I mean, they were once in our shoes. It's not going to look terrible. I would say maybe try not to schedule more than like 2 in a week, or do a morning session and then come into the clinic in the afternoon or vice versa. But don't worry, totally do your interview and just let them know in advance.
And then like even when you get the notification, like if you're in the clinic or if you're in the hospital, just like let them know like, hey, I just have to do something really quick, and then come back. Like it's not that crucial. You don't have to wait before signing up because like the time goes by. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, guys. Okay, so it's been touched on a little bit. Next question is, what are considerations for applying for a transitional year or preliminary year program?
Um, I used to ask this on my interviews as one of the questions. Usually you'll get a part of your interview where you get to interview the residents, and then I'll ask them about who did a transition year, who did a prelim year to kind of get a different feel, like to see what they say. And a lot of times what I would get is like, really there's no big difference. I think um between the two. It's just really like I treated it as like, where do I want to live? Like, where do I want to be? And I've heard that transition years can be a little less intense in some places, but that might just be for particular programs. I had one interview where all the residents just voluntarily added in how much their prelim year at that program sucked. And just they weren't even cued to say it. They came out there multiple times and said it. And then other places, the prelim years don't have any call. So it just varies between where like program to program. But generally, I think that it a lot of times prelim years will be at the same hospital. Like sometimes advanced programs have prelim years at that spot, so you don't have to move if they're not categorical. So that's something to think about. Transition years usually aren't, but either way, like you're still going to be a great doctor. So I think the intern year is less important as the PM&R years. It's still very important. But generally, like most, I think transition years are a little bit less stressful than prelim years. But again, that depends on the program. They vary so widely. You can have an intense transition year and a really more chill prelim year. So it's very program specific. but that having to move afterwards, I think is a big thing that I saw with prelim years and associated with advanced programs.
Yeah, I think Austin really hit the nail on the head. I think a small thing I considered, if you're there for a year, I had the one spreadsheet I had did have salaries for those 1 year programs. And for me, it was kind of like, if I'm going to be there for a year, what benefits do they have? Do they have stuff to cover level 3, like study materials? Do they give you an education stipend to cover a laptop, maybe? Things that like could just make that intern year a little bit more tolerable. Again, that wasn't what I made my list on, but it was a small consideration for me. Because like Austin said, really, TY prelim, it really wasn't like a game changer for me.
Yeah, similar to what they've said. Like I tried to choose TY prelim programs that coordinated with the advanced programs of the PM&R program. So then that way I would be hopefully living in the same place. I wouldn't have to make too many moves. But in the end, I ended up ranking more of the categoricals above the advanced. And then I think it just depends on what you want. If you want to live in two separate locations, you have that option. If you want to live close by, you have that. And then there's categorical. So it just depends on what you want.
I will say there's a lot of great programs that are advanced in totality. So you may have to, heavily consider doing prelim in transition years. And the reason I say that is remember who you're applying against for these positions. You're applying against people with some of the best like test scores and experiences in the country. So you may have to apply more broadly than you think. You may have to apply to a lot of community-based programs. You may not get in a big city like you want near the program that you're going to. Don't forget that, these are really competitive positions that other people are going for as well. And they may not have as many categorical options as we do as PM&R. So I said I applied to like 50 PM&R programs. I applied to 25 prelim and transition years. And I ended up with, I think, 4 interviews for prelim and transition year. So make sure you're casting a wide net. I definitely wish I would have cast mine wider. And then as far as the programs themselves, just make sure you're asking a lot of questions based on the experiences that you want to have, whether it's inpatient or outpatient, if there's neurology, if that's something that's important to you, if there's the opportunity to research or to go to conferences, all those things. Just ask all the questions and then make sure you attend their open house nights. I feel like the residents give you a better feel for those programs than the interview days do. They are usually really short interview days.
Any last things to add on here?
Yeah, one thing to think about too, if you're between the two, not really necessarily between the two, but it's just for a year. So like if you want to save some money and like live at home for a year and then you can take that money, like I want to buy a house my second year and it would be a lot easier if I was a little bit closer to my parents. I could live at my parents' house for that year. But if I did that, I could almost save up my like everything that I make and then buy a house when I start residency or have more money. Like think about that as well if that's something that you want to be interested in.
This is great, guys. Thank you. So we're going to go on to some of the pre-submitted questions, and I tried to summarize them just based on theme, so we'll just touch on a few of them. I think definitely the most common one, probably 9 or 10 people submitted this one, but the grand question of to take COMLEX and USMLE or just COMLEX, that is the question. So if you take STEP, I guess, would you advise taking it? And if so, would you advise taking both of them or just one of them? And if so, which one?
I think I used to think I knew the answer to this question as like it used to be definitely take STEP. But going through this process, like I really don't know if it matters. I think you will always have more doors open at at more like higher, some specific programs, but I don't really think there's a lot of them that it matters. And I think boards are not as important as people make them out to be score wise and whether you take STEP or not. I took STEP. And I don't regret it, but I just don't know if I saw the benefit. I mean, it's a metric to have. Like no one, if you the thing is if you take it and you do fine or well, then like there's no reason for them to be like, oh, if they have that on their rubric, like what was their step score, then they can't reject you off of that. But like I just don't think programs really cared, in all honesty. So like I think take step if you want to, if you really have your eyes set on like competing with those like I'm sure there's programs like Harvard requires step, or like maybe I don't know which ones do. Like I generally think that like it doesn't really matter as much as people think it does.
Yeah, I took both. I thought everyone took both, to be honest. That was just me being a little not paying attention to the world around me. Because I thought we got that first aid book. It said step on it, so I thought everyone took step. That's on me. Um, so yeah.
So for like level one, step one, I just took level one, and then for second boards, I took both. And I just took both because kind of like what we've already talked about, like I just didn't want them to ding me for not taking it. So I wanted to be at the same level. Like that was what my goal was. So if there's something that's still in you that you just don't want to left any rocks like unturned, then I would just keep taking it. That's my advice.
I did the same thing as Josselyne. I did not take step one. I ended up taking step two, um, mostly because I felt more prepared for step two. I feel like all of the study materials that exist out there, the UWorlds and the question banks, are all written for step two anyway. So if you're doing the studying, you're more likely going to score higher on step two than you will on COMLEX. Granted, I don't think score, as long as you're not close to like the failing mark, means a great deal to anybody. If you pass, you pass. I think I like just snuck into that like median quartile, which I was really happy about. And also I took I took four, I think, of the NBMEs, and every single one of my scores on NBME was lower than what I ended up with on test day. And I think that is like across the board a common experience for most people. But like the other people on this call, we, despite maybe having taken one and not the other, all got interviews at programs like Colorado, UW, NYU, Kessler, Miami, all of those programs, Shirley Ryan. So it's not going to weed you out if you don't take it. So don't be worried. And then if you happen to do poorly on one of them, you can talk about that in your interview, but don't give it too much air. If they're interviewing you, it's because they want you there and they saw something in your application that stood out to them. So once you kind of get over that hoop and get an interview, just be yourself.
Any other comments? Okay. I really liked this question. So they asked, what was the level of knowledge or expertise about PM&R you felt like you needed to be successful in auditions, and what resources were most helpful in getting you to that point? As someone that doesn't have a home program, it's hard to know what the expectations are for med students, or who maybe don't have in-house resources to prepare them. So I guess just, yeah, baseline of knowledge kind of going into audition rotations, and then any resources.
So when I went to AAP and I talked to some of the program directors on my third year, particularly one of them, I asked, like, I'm really interested in your program. Like, what do you expect from me on day one of my rotation? And he basically said, oh, I don't expect anything. Like, just be excited to be here, be eager to learn, and really be like engaged. Like Ryan had mentioned earlier, like they know most people don't have home programs. Like, it's not a required rotation. A lot of them do not expect you to know things. And just like those little things, like I did before, like knowing the therapist, being eager to learn, hanging out with the residents, going to therapy sessions, you learn a lot with that. And then what I did during those rotations was whatever I would see during the day, I'd have a notebook and I would just write it down, these little PM&R concepts. And then I would go into the PM&R Pocketpedia, or they usually have a Cucurello in the residence lounge, and I would go and read up on it. The attendings usually will have like when I was on teams with residents, it would be a like we'd have a discussion. She'd be like, tomorrow, let's go talk about disorders of consciousness. So then I would go home and I would just read up on Cucurello, Pocketpedia, take notes, and really study that before. And then I could kind of show that I learned. So like when they tell you to look things up and learn about this, then that's when I did the learning. I didn't do a lot of preparing for the rotation, although I will say um, I did an outpatient neurology rotation in my third year, and that was really valuable to me because I was really good at doing a neuro exam. So like that was one thing I think that helped me stand out a little bit in my auditions. But as far as like what to know going in, they didn't really expect much. They know we're third years. We just finished the cores and it's PMR is not a required rotation.
Yeah, I agree. I real quick, I think I was just told early on, it's normal and expected to get things wrong once or twice. Just on that third time around, like Ryan said, just being teachable and understanding how let's try and get that right that third time. Even sometimes I would like purposely get something slightly wrong just to like they could teach me it, and then the next time I wouldn't get it wrong. I think it would just look a little way to have them say, "Hey, like he's learning and he's taking advantage of that."
Yeah, really day one, just try to be on time, try to find out who your resident is, hopefully before your rotation starts. So then, like, if they have sent you emails like on onboarding or like contact numbers, like make sure you've already like texted your resident so they know you're gonna be coming. I think that was like the only thing that I was really worried about on day one, because otherwise I had nothing like going in, like no PM&R in general. I was late to PM&R like third year. So I think as long as you are there, ready to learn, ready to like just take it all in, because we really don't know what PM&R is until we're at that rotation. That's all that they're really looking for. So yeah, you guys don't worry about day one. It's just once you get your groove, it'll be okay.
I think you can get a lot of resources online and spend a lot of money and probably stress yourself out a ton to do well on these rotations by your own standard. I think some of the standards that really matter are how you're viewed by the resident that you're working with and the attending that you're working with. So get to know them on a personal basis. I think the best source of information that you can ever have is the resident that you're working with, because likely they've already been there either a year or multiple years, and they know the flow. They know the attendings, they know their tendencies. Start to pick up on those little things. If you happen to not have access to their EMR, which, like, shocking, happens almost everywhere you go, have them print you out a patient list at least once a week, if not like every other day. That way you get updated on things. Make sure you're passing off little tidbits of information that you learn while going to talk to the patient while no one else is around. Like Gerardo said, you can ask questions that you already know a little bit about, and then sort of like add in the little things that you do know on a topic, but allow the attending or the resident to give you like a fuller understanding of something. That's totally okay. And I would say asking questions and making sure that you have a full understanding of the patients that you're assigned is like the best way to go about making sure you have the right information. Likely at the beginning of your rotation, they're going to be like, well, how many patients do you think you can carry? The answer is not the entire service. The answer is like 2 to 3 max. So especially on the inpatient side where things move quickly, you want to be up to date on as many things as you possibly can. You won't get it all, but it's all part of the learning process. So make sure you're asking your resident every day of maybe not every day, but some days about feedback, some days about things that you can do for them. And then just like general questions about their experience while they're there, because at the end of your rotation, the person who they're going to ask on how you really did on the rotation is probably the resident, if not, the attending as a second.
Any additional thoughts there? Okay, that's great, guys. And I said there was a little bit of the chat about this, but we'll just ask a brief question about this. So what kind of research would you recommend that will provide the best knowledge and experience to succeed in residency, and how much research would you recommend doing? And I know Austin touched on that in the chat, but just wanted to go around too.
Yeah, so I'll just add a little bit that I don't think PM&R is super research heavy in general. I've gotten interviewers who are like PhDs, and they pointed out how a lot of the PM&R scientific journals have very low impact factors. So like a lot of people, I don't think it's a big deal, but I used it to go to conferences for my school to pay for me. It's also great to I would use research as a networking tool to work with other people in the field of PM&R. So you can cold email. I've cold emailed people and just getting a connection with them through research. Say, hey, I'm interested in your research in X, Y, and Z. Is there any way I can help you out? And then that builds a connection. You can find programs you really love. And that's what I did my first year of med school. I went and found the programs that I really liked and was really interested in. I looked at their faculty and I cold emailed them saying, hey, I'm really interested in the research you're doing. And then it built relationships. So research is not necessarily huge and required. I think it's in PM&R, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I always thought of it as just like a box to check on their rubric before the interview. Like, did they do something? Are they at least somewhat curious in research? And then they didn't really ask me much more over that. But before that, I used it to build connections to kind of help me network in the field of PM&R, because that is something that I think is really valuable.
Right.
I think I did mostly case reports across the board, and I think that's what you'll see out of most student experiences. You can do like review a bunch of abstracts online, or participate in a journal club, do a national org, or any of those things. But I think what Austin touched on is that getting to conferences is such a unique experience that you need to have. I will say I got two of my rotations that were in my fourth year solely through going to the conference and face to face shaking hands with the program director. I was like cotton mouth and breathing heavy and scared to talk to them, because like you view these people as being untouchable for a long time, but it really is just face to face interactions and letting them get to know you a little bit that can help you get your foot in the door. And then the last thing that I relate to that Austin said about cold emailing, don't be afraid to do that to anywhere you want to go. If whether you want to do research with them, or whether you want a rotation with them, or you just want them to generally know that you're interested in their program, like email their program coordinator, who's usually the only contact listed, because they don't want you, reaching out to their program director. And make sure they know who you are. And that sort of like repetitive nature and like the recency bias and all those things that go into people's decision making really does work. It is kind of a strategy to match to residency. So make sure you're not leaving sort of any stone unturned in that realm.
I'll add that like I wasn't really research heavy. Like the only thing that I had was like one publication with like a resident and like her team. And that was just through, so they found like research with like the AOCPMR like conferences or the other PM&R conferences, but mine was like LMSA. And then there was like a certain part during LMSA where it was like roundtables, and then some PM&R residents ended up coming there, and then that's where I got connected with them. So like just go to like different things and you may be surprised. You'll just meet people. PM&R, even though it's like a small world, like you'll be surprised. You'll start to remember like all these people in these chats like once you go on your interviews as well. So I think research is really important, but I will say I wasn't like super heavy in it. So we are still okay if that's not your thing.
There was a question in the chat about, is it beneficial to go to conferences as an M2, AAPM&R, AOCPMR? Absolutely, yes. I went to AOCPMR as a first year and still found it invaluable. Like you'll take away things that will help broaden your like vocabulary about the field. You'll just start to get more comfortable with the like application cycle and all of the things just by hearing these things. It's like osmosis of information. It's never too early to start. AAPM&R, tons of people have great experiences going to that. It's usually a little pricier than the other conferences. AAP does charge a pretty large fee as well. If you can get money from your school for like doing a presentation, that's great. AOCPM&R is the cheapest and typically the smallest, which is good for networking. But if you're going after as many programs in one place, sort of think about that in your decision making of which conference to go to.
I want to add on to that, you go into these conferences is always valuable because you'll meet we talk mostly about talking to program directors and maybe residents, but I met a bunch of med students. They have med student socials at these kinds of conferences. So you get to meet other med students who are also applying. They might be a little bit ahead of you, and you can get great advice from them as well as residents and program directors. I went to AAPM&R as an M2, and I talked to a program director as a second year, and they told me to email them, and then I'm welcome at their didactics anytime. So it's meaningful to get started as early as you can, but it's not a problem if you start a little later, like your M3 or even the beginning of your M4 year.
One thing I want to add on real quick, if you can't go to these conferences, a great way we've said the word networking a million times, social media, I'm a huge advocate of it. Med, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I think PM&R especially has its own little niche that they are really flourishing on there. Again, I see it more as like it is a social platform. I follow some program directors, but I'm not DMing them, hey, what's up? If I do DM them, it's more of a, hey, my name's Gerardo, and introduce yourself, similar to like an email kind of format. But I use it more just to connect with residents. I wasn't afraid to follow their Instagrams or follow their Twitters and be like, hey, like, can you tell me a little bit more about your program? Because that's where we're going to get like that really kind of inside info. So really reaching out to that. I know AOCPMR is having a big talk, I think, later in June on how to make a med Twitter. So really kind of keep an eye out for that if you don't have one yet.
With the last 5-10 minutes we have remaining, just want to open the floor if you want to add any additional questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask a question, you'll feel free to do so now.
Hi, I have some questions. Can I go ahead and ask?
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. I just want to ask questions that you guys meant, ask questions based off what you guys had mentioned, because I felt like I didn't really understand it. So I think, was it Gerardo? You mentioned rotating with MSKCC. Did I hear that incorrectly?
No, yeah, I did up in New York City. I did 2 weeks there.
Okay. So I was just Googling, does MSKCC have a PMR residency program?
No, the NYP residents rotate there, but they don't have a specific residency program.
Okay,
So
but it's still, got it. But
Yeah.
it's still like an audition rotation option for us.
Yeah, I did it in January, but I know some people do it early on. It is kind of like a pseudo rotation with NYP if you kind of want to meet their residents, but you're not going to be working directly with their program director. And so be that.
Right. And it's like more so focused on cancer rehab.
Exactly.
Cool. Thank you.
If you don't mind, I may add in really quick to that. If you're looking to sort of use the other rotation time you have advantageously, you can apply to like I did my ICU rotation here at Lurie Children's Hospital, which is where I kind of combined matched. And they were able to like send hey, Ryan was here and did really well on his rotation in January, which was still before the match. So like Gerardo used the time that he had to go do another 2 weeks at Memorial Sloan Kettering, like it could have worked out for him that he matched to like New York Presbyterian because he had that little extra push to get ahead. So don't think those other rotations that you have during fourth year can't count as something, or that they're, you know, too late if it's a January, February rotation. The programs don't make their decisions about, or their full rank list decisions until like, you know, mid-March.
Well, thank you. And then one last question is regarding like the special paragraph at the very end of your personal statement. I didn't quite catch that. Can someone like reiterate what that is?
Yeah, I did this for 2 programs. So Ryan did this for a lot more, but I pretty much wrote a why that program as my second to last paragraph. And the way it was described to me to do this is if you usually want your personal statement to be a page long, because program directors don't want to read a huge multi-long novel, but you can keep them reading just onto the top of the second page. If you end the first page with a why their specific program, you're pretty much, as I was told, buttering them up. So you're like, oh, I like your program for XYZ. I loved working with this attending, this attending, this attending. This is a great place. I love the location. And then on the top of that next page is your conclusion paragraph. So that's how it was explained to me to do it. And I wrote that for, I think, 2 of my programs.
That's super smart. Thank you.
Think we may have to go to the chat to start answering some of them. As far as, I'll be quick on this because I know not everyone's interested in working with kids. The PEDS rehab combined programs don't use signaling. So it is like kind of a separate thing. You don't have to rank them against the other programs. As far as signaling goes, you do have to rank, like if a program has an advanced and a categorical, you have to rank both those positions. So say, like I applied to Shirley Ryan for my combined residency. I did have to rank, like I ranked Shirley Ryan, you know, 3 of my positions in my, you know, top list. So you do have to like play a little game with that and understanding that the programs that do have multiple types of positions, they're going to take up more space on your rank list. As far as TY and prelim year, anybody else can jump in, but I did submit an internal medicine. I had a neurology rotation during med school, and I submitted that in place of one of my PM&R letters. When I submitted for PM&R, I did 2 PM&R letters and a PEDS oncology letter, and then I used an internal med letter in my TY and prelim year just so that they kind of got a fuller scope. Most places suggest 3 letters. Some places suggest 4. When you go to apply, you'll see how many you can submit. If you can submit all of them, just submit them all. Submit them all. Like the people did the work to write them for you. If you think they're good, you can submit them all.
Well, we're just about 9 o'clock here. I guess one final note that I have to add is that there was just a residency directors panel on Tuesday night that the executive council held. And so if you weren't able to attend that, I think you can go on the YouTube page. I don't know if it's there now, but I'm sure it'll be there soon. So certainly would recommend watching that. It's very complimentary to everything we talked about tonight. But I want to be sensitive to your guys' time. I just want everyone to, and yeah, Brian kind enough to put his email in the chat for us. You guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to our panelists. We can just give them a round of applause. So very thankful for you guys. Really, really appreciate your time. Any final thoughts as we close here, panelists?
My big thing is really just remember we're assessing these programs. I think at first it's very hard to be like, oh my God, you're getting all these interviews and that's great. And they're like kind of they have you under a microscope, but understand we're really finding our good fit and the match works in mysterious ways and it really does favor us as the applicant. So really understand that, prioritize that, and it'll all work out.
I couldn't have said it more beautiful than that.
I listened to a couple of podcasts sort of at the end of before I submitted my rank list. One of them was with the new program director at UT San Antonio that Megan Mardashti did as part of AOCPMR. And one of the things he said during that stood out to me that yes, you're going to make a ton of lasting relationships and that, residency is going to be a meaningful time in your life, but don't forget that in the grand scheme of how long your, career and journey through the specialty is going to be, it is just, it's a short time. So don't feel super overwhelmed by the decision that you have to make to rank. Go on gut and make sure you, have considered all the things that are important to you. But at the end, when you submit it, just be confident in the choice that you've made because it really is a personal journey.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much again. Really appreciate it. And hope you guys have all a wonderful rest of your night. And until the next event, we'll see you later. Thank you so much.